This is part 2. Part 1 is linked below, unless I forgot to add the link, in which case part 1 is not linked below. Also, Mercury says hi, apparently. Okay, we're back. Let's talk about Linden. I love Linden as a character. He's probably my favorite character in Engage, which is why I wanted to talk about him first. I think, especially with the existence of the Old Well, Linden does not bring much to the table. Like, he does have one niche, I guess two, technically. He has the, like, you can do crit stuff with him because of his personal ability. But he doesn't have good strength, so, like, you gotta go magical crit, and then there's no tomes with inherent crit in them, so I've heard people suggest,
Engage
like...
tomes are so boring.
Yeah, other than, like, Obscurite has crit, and that's the only one. Like, they gave crit to one tome, and it's a personal tome. And then they give the Brave effect to the S-rank one. It's funny, because every vanilla Engage tome is kind of boring, and then it has the only interesting S-rank weapon in Nova.
Yeah. Like, I think Surge is interesting, I think Thunder is interesting, but I think they could have done so much more with Wind. If they wanted to maybe make Wind the crit variant and then Fire the damage variant, that could have worked, but they just decided, no, let's just be boring.
But you could do a crit build with him and, like, make up for the fact that tomes don't have inherent crit by giving him a Dire Thunder if you wanted. Like, a crit Dire Thunder could be funny. If you get, like, 60% crit and you are brave, that would be fun. Or you can send him into Griffin Knight, because he has inherent staff, so he has access to the movement staffs in Griffin Knight. But Pandreo also has inherent staff, and then Ivy and Hortensia have access to... And I think Mavier has inherent staff, too. So, like, Linden's not the only person who can be a flyer with movement staffs. It is a niche that he has, but, like...
Yeah.
You're probably using Ivy and Hortensia, and, like, if you need a third one, Pandreo can go Griffin Knight. Do you really need a four... Like, how much are you warp skipping that you need 4 Griffin Knights with warp access?
Yeah, I don't know. I see so many people using Linden, but I've honestly never used this unit at all, outside of, I think he used a Thoron use once in his joining chapter.
He's funny. Like, he's a great character. I love him as a character, and it's funny to... I love using bad units. I used him in my first playthrough. I didn't use Pandreo in my first playthrough. I used Linden instead. He was my dedicated sage. But I do think he either belongs in fun meme tier or worst of the worst.
I'm gonna say he's a fun meme. His crit builds make people make awful crit builds that end up with him getting 80 to 90% crit, and it's fun. He's a fun unit to use. Even if he's bad, he's at least fun, which he has over the worst of the worst, which aren't even fun to use.
The first ever 100% crit build I saw on YouTube was a Linden one, so I have a soft spot for him. I know it's easier to do it with, like, Panette, but Linden's the first one I ever saw, so, like, I associate... And he has the personal skill for it, which, like, other people do too, but he can do some fun stuff. I'm aware of the fact that Radiant Bow Sniper Linden is a thing for LTCing, which, like, is not being factored into this at all.
Seriously?
No joke. The Radiant Bow is cracked as hell.
Yes, it is. And I guess he has high magic.
He does.
And so you give him to Lyn, and so make him a sniper.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that actually works.
It does, yeah, it does. So I haven't...
It shouldn't work, but it does.
At the time of recording, this video hasn't come out yet, but at the time of release it will. But I've talked about... I like Morbius as a... or Mavier as a sniper for the same reason. So I imagine in the chapters where you don't have him, if you're doing an LTC and you haven't trained people, sending him into Radiant Bow Lyn Sniper is... gets a similar effect. It's not going to be as good. And if you trained Pandreo, like if you're not LTCing, Pandreo definitely has better magic than Linden, so you can just do the same thing with him. But I thought it was worth mentioning.
I think the answer is the Radiant Bow is cracked.
The Radiant Bow is incredibly good. Like, forge Fogato's Silver Bow into a Radiant Bow immediately. Always. Always, always, always. Donnel. Let's talk about Donnel. Do you like Donnel?
So I've used Donnel. I used Donnel in the very first run I ever did of Awakening in hard mode. Kind of like probably everyone who played, Awakening on normal or hard. I fed him up, I made him a hero, and then he, like, soloed the rest of the end game, along with his kid, who I married him off to Cordelia and had Donnel plus Severa just pair up and be two heroes with unbreakable weapons, dominating the game, because that's hard mode because of Arms Thrift.
Yeah.
I forged him a funny glass sword because it was cheap and cheaper to forge than a silver sword, and it still didn't matter because it would never break because he had like 48 luck in Arms Thrift.
That's hilarious.
And then I played Lunatic, and then Donnel can't physically contribute at all. Like, you have to. I've nicknamed putting 4 units around an archer Donneling an archer, specifically because that's what you have to do to give him a level up in order to get him to join your party in his paralog. Like, I use the term Donneling an archer now because of him, because of that.
That's very funny.
He's one of those units where it's like, yes, he's hurt by villager class bases being incredibly low. Yes, he has good potential because of aptitude being a plus 20 global to all stats. But he's an awakening. So, in awakening, if you can't, if not out of the box, at least very quickly, do an incredibly abusive build, then you're not Lunatic and Lunatic Plus viable.
I think he suffers from a similar problem as Ash, where, like, he can become a big ball of stats in a broken unit, but a lot of units in Awakening can be big balls of stats, and he doesn't really offer anything that they don't. He is a gigantic growths unit in a sea of gigantic growths units. It's not a one-to-one.
Sorry.
I was just saying, it's not a one-to-one comparison with Ash, because, like, they have different problems. Donnel's hurt by the reclassing system, whereas Ash is hurt by, like, the combat arts system. But I think that at the end of the day, they're both units who can become incredibly broken builds, but so can almost everyone around them.
Yeah, like, he doesn't have bad class access. I think he has, Sniper and Mercenary?
Oh,
Mercedon? What the heck am I talking about?
By the reclass
Archer
system...
and Mercenary, I think, are his other options outside of Villager.
Yeah, I didn't mean he has bad classes. By the reclass system, I meant... so he has a problem where he starts in Villager...
restart at level 1?
Having to restart at E-rank Lances after he gets to level 10.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Neither Mercenary nor... Is it Mercenary and Fighter?
I think it's Mercenary and Archer that he gets.
Whatever it is, none of his endgames...
But I could just be mixing that up with Mozu.
None of his possible endgames can have Lances. So all of that time you spend in Villager... Because Villager can't promote either. It can only second seal. So none of that time you spend in Villager building your Lance rank is contributing to his weapon ranks. And, like... It hurts a unit like Pawn to go Wyvern and get E-rank axes. I still think it's the best choice for her, but it hurts her. A unit like Donnel having to reset to E-rank that really, really sucks.
Yeah, and it's not even DSFE E-rank where, in one rank you can use javelins or hand axes or whatever. You have to get 2 ranks because those are C rank, because E rank is bronze tier.
He's stuck at bronze. I believe javelins are D rank, but I might be wrong about that.
Yeah, so he has bronze weapons and then joke weapons like the glass sword or, the log or something. I put him probably in fun meme tier because I think, it's fun to raise a unit from literally nothing to the biggest ball of stats in your army outside of Robin. But it's one of those things of, he has some of the highest potential in the game, but he starts so much lower than everyone else, and you're right that the weapon limitation is just crippling, because when you're reclassing in the early mid game, probably late Plegia, mid Plegia arc, if you're fast about it.
Yeah.
If you're not, then it's late Plegia, early Valm arc, by which point he's, you don't want to be stuck with bronze weapons there.
I also think the end game of him is just... the end game of him is something that most units with Mercenary can access. Because, he has higher growth than everyone else, but it's not like everyone else has terrible growths. It's not an Essence situation where her amazing growths are an outlier. He just has, like, slightly better growths than other people.
Yeah, definitely. And that's all because of aptitude. So, funnily enough, what Donnel does better is give aptitude to a child unit and then have them just get auto-leveled with those plus 20% growths. And then his child will surpass him.
I think also his children get Pegasus Knight from him, because Villager can't be passed down in Awakening.
Yeah, they get Pegasus Knight from him, so you have to work for Gale Force, but you can do it. But also his children will be in a better starting class that has better weapon ranks.
Or it might be Fighter instead of Villager, because I think he gets Fighter as his other option. It's Mercenary and Fighter, because Fighter is male exclusive.
Yeah, so I think because Fighter's male exclusive, I think some of his kids get Pegasus Knight because that switches over to female exclusive.
Yes.
Awakening is weird, man.
It is. It's so weird. The most weird gender lock class thing is that Pawn can't pass Wyvern Knight down to her son, even though Wyvern Knight is not female exclusive.
Yeah.
I don't know why she doesn't pass him Wyvern Knight. But, speaking of units who don't get Wyvern Knight, Wendy's definitely in fun meme tier, right? Like,
Wendy is a fun meme, because, yeah, she joins... It's the Rolf situation. She's a horrible unit who gets one-rounded by everyone in her joining chapter, at least on hard mode, but she's still fun to train, and she is still trainable, and you get something at the end of training her, at least. And it's not like Sophia, who joins, after another 10 chapters. She at least has a little bit to grow. Yeah, you get her, and then you immediately go into the Western Isles where everyone has an axe and just wants to kill her. But it's one of those things of what separates Worst of the Worst from fun meme tier is kind of shaky at best, but I'm okay with putting her in fun meme tier.
I mean, she can Armor Knight Triangle attack. That's a fun meme. She doesn't need a single point of stats to contribute to the Armor Knight Triangle attack. You just need to have no dignity and deploy all 3 Armor Knights in an FE6 map.
Yeah. One of these days I will do an FE6 Armor Knight run, but that day is not today.
I also think it's worth noting that she joins shortly before what I would consider a bit of a breather arc. Chapter 8, Chapter 8X, and Chapter 9 are all pretty easy, and Chapter 10A is also pretty easy. So you can just, Donnel and Archer and train her up, and then she'll be fine. She's at Weapon Triangle disadvantage, but her hit rates are garbage even if she's at Weapon Triangle advantage, so that doesn't matter too much.
You can hole up in the treasure room in Chapter 8, make sure that she's not in range of any archers, and then just have her, Actually, I don't know if she can javelin right away. You might need to train her up a little bit with an Iron Lance, but then she can javelin her way to whatever level you want her to be.
Yeah. And even if she can't, there's a pretty easy... I think the AI in Chapter 8's, treasure room guys... Or not treasure room, the room that she starts in with Broken Wall, right? You break that wall, and then move everyone far enough away that none of the ambush spawns from that room will be able to reach. They clog the door such that an archer is in the one tie-wide choke point, and you just have Wendy run up to that archer and start poking him, and no one else can reach her.
Yeah, that's what you do. And so, Wendy has some easy ways to train her. She's not a good unit. No one's ever going to accuse Wendy of being good, but Wendy's fun.
I think on the graph of bad units, she's in the middle where it's fun to use, but they're not so frustrating as to be unfun.
Yes, and she doesn't necessarily have any super, unique niches, but she doesn't really need a super unique niche to still be a fun meme.
I think that what we said about Wendy basically applies to Meg as well. She joins earlier than Wendy, and notably, she's one of the tankier units you have in her join chapter, where the Laguz are, one-rounding a lot of your squad. She can take a hit. The Laguz
still one-round Meg, I think.
Some of them do. I believe she can take a hit from tigers, but she gets doubled and killed by cats. But it might be the other way around, where, the tigers double and kill her, but the cats double and don't kill her.
I think that's what it is, because her speed is better than you would expect from an Armor Knight, but her defense is... She has the... Meg is what you would get if you put Amelia into Armor Knights. except with swords instead of lances, so worse weapon type.
Well, in Radiant Dawn, the Wind Edge exists, so is it really worse?
Wind Edge only has 6 might.
Oh, ew.
Yeah, she's... I have used her in a hard mode run where I brought every general and every mage into the tower, and even doing that, you still have a couple of extra slots for, like, 1 or 2 Laguz Royals who actually carry the game for you. No, so I gave her, I leveled her up using primarily bonus experience, which actually made her worse, because then she was only getting 3... I didn't know this at the time, but she actually was only getting, +3 stats when her growths are high enough that she should be getting a decent mix of other stuff.
Yeah.
And so she ended up with terrible stats. I gave her the Blessed Alondite, and she still wasn't able to survive. No, she was kind of able to survive some of the dragons. She actually had decent resistance for a martial. Once again, it's kind of the awakening thing, though, when you promote her, of she gets E-rank lances and then E-rank axes.
Oh, goodness.
E-rank at lances at general and E-rank axes at martial. So she's so far behind that swords are her only option. And
Yeah.
Radiant Dawn invented bronze weapons and didn't have joke weapons, so you're stuck with like 50 uses of a bronze sword unless you get kills with it.
Just forge her a sword, and you can give it a
Yeah.
funny name, like Family Guy.
Yeah, exactly. I'll put her in fun meme tier. I think that she's fun enough to train, and she's not that hard to train because her bases are pretty good for her level. It's just she has a very, very poor showing against the Laguz right off the bat, because Laguz and Radiant Dawn are jacked.
Well, I got another unit for you who has a poor showing against Laguz right off the bat, and also everyone else on his join map. Do you have thoughts about Sothe?
I use Sothe in like 3 chapters when I want 2 thieves. And that's about it. Sothe has the fun notoriety of most of the time, on average, being worse if you level him to 20 and send him transfers over to Radiant Dawn than Radiant Dawn's base Sothe. But in Path of Radiance specifically, Sothe has Blossom, which slows down his EXP gain in order to gain extra stats, which don't matter.
Yeah, and it's weird too, the way that they calculate extra stats is like some weird math formula that nerds know that I don't.
Yeah, no, it's kind of like it rolls the stat twice. It's like 2RN, but for stat growth. Is the best way to put it, but that's not fully true. It's weird. Blossom is weird. Sothe is only really useful as a thief that doesn't, cost you gold, which only matters until you get the 50,000 gold from day in, and then you never have to worry about gold again.
There's a third thief in the game that also doesn't cost you, because Volk costs you gold, right? And Sothe doesn't cost you gold. But the chest keys also don't cost you gold, and you get more than enough chest keys. I think you have to skip, if you don't use Sothe or Volk, you skip 2 chests, and there's chests that have steel swords and shit.
Yeah. You can break doors in Path of Radiance, which means you don't need thieves to open them. In fact, most of the time it's better to do that, because behind most doors are 2 enemies that will kill your thief if you sent them alone.
Yup.
He's useful on the boat map in order to get all the treasure before the ravens start stealing it.
True.
Again, you could use chest keys there, but I think you only really have 1 chest key at that point, and you get one from killing someone, but then you want to use that on the enemy boat.
You can have 2 chest keys from Chapter 7, and the treasure you get in Chapter 7 is the Miracle Scroll, the Armor Slayer, and one other item that I can't remember, and therefore is probably bad.
Yeah. I think it's some extra gold or something. I think that Sothe has a little bit of utility, just because of that. He does have worse though not worse by too much stats than Volk at base, but it is worse enough so that he can't always steal like the weapons or the staves that Volk can.
I actually
because
think
stealing
it's
is based on speed and strength.
I think it's hugely worse. Because he's stuck in thief caps instead of getting assassin caps, he can never steal from swords masters. And because his strength is pretty terrible, the high priority, he can steal physics staffs, but even then from like sages he can't steal them. The high priority weapons you want to get, like the Laguz Slayer, there's a Laguz Slayer and a killer bow, and I think it's unlikely, unless you train him, which you probably aren't, it's unlikely that he's going to be able to get those. Whereas Volk needs 1 point of strength in order to steal a killer bow or a Laguz Slayer, which are, I think, the biggest things you want to steal in Path of Radiance, other than physics staves.
Yeah, so this is what it is that Volk starts with 12 strength and 13 speed, Sothe starts with 5 strength and 11 speed.
Yeah, and like
and
I
they
said,
both have the same strength and speed growth, basically. Yeah.
And Volk still needs a point of strength proc. Like, if I'm playing casually, I usually rig him a point of strength with bonus experience in his join chapter, because there's Laguz Slayer you can steal in Blood Runs Red, and then that also lets him just steal killer bows for the rest of the game. And this is like, it's not a huge deal. Like, I don't think Volk is a good unit because of that, but it's something that Sothe can't even do. That Volk can't. I really don't like Sothe.
That's fair.
If you want a second thief, he's fine. Like, if you need 2 thieves for a map, that's fine. But I think in most maps where you want a second thief, you can just use chest keys. Or in, like you said, the boat map, right? I let the ravens get the treasure and then kill them and they drop it, is typically how I do that. Because I can focus my units on combat, the ravens prioritize getting the treasure, and then I can just kill them pretty easily with, Astrid or Oscar or Kieran or someone.
That's fair. Yeah, we can...
Where does that put him, though?
I don't know. It's
I want him in worst of the worst, but I think you want...
or worst of the worst. I don't know.
Compromise
I don't want to
him
split
as a
the
meme.
difference and say fun meme, because I don't think he's actually a fun meme.
Well,
though maybe Blossom is a fun meme, though.
the Blossom and the transfers thing is a fun meme. I know that there's supposedly a lot of misconceptions around transfers, but I don't want to dive into that because I don't actually know how his transfers work. Yeah, I just know that
the way that transfers work is, Sothe transfers his whole stats versus everyone else just transfers pluses to stats that cap.
I'm aware of that much, but I know that, because you said that he usually ends up worse, right? Every time you bring that up, there's always someone who says, actually, that's not true. There's some stuff that's exaggerated about that.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that functions.
Basically the same on average, but because Fire Emblem doesn't use average growth, it uses randomized growth, he will generally end up worse. But he's basically the same if you transfer him. It's just slight differences in where some of his stats are. I'm okay putting him worst of the worst. I think that he is only utility as a second thief, and that's it. And you're right that utility can be easily made up for by chest keys or workarounds using other enemy thieves to steal the treasure for you.
And even on most maps where you want a thief, even if you're not using chest keys, one is fine. A lot of the maps are super linear.
Yeah, and then it's okay, if you really need your thief to be in 2 places at once, you can set up a convoluted rescue chain to get them to the second place.
True. Anna, I feel very similarly with Anna as I do with Ash. Everyone clowns on her for being one of the worst units in Three Houses. I think it's hilarious that she's one of the worst units and you have to pay for her to get her. I am glad that they made her the one you pay for and Yuritsa the free one, because I didn't buy the Three Houses DLC until it went on sale much, much later. And I am glad that the bad unit's the one you pay for. I think that's funny. But
yeah,
I also think her terribleness is greatly exaggerated. I think that she can, if you invest in her, send her through the correct class lines, she can be fine as, she'll never be the best magical unit or physical unit, but she can be fine as either. Like, she can be a rescue bot. She can be a she can be a rescue bot. She can be like a go into any of the generic end game 3 houses builds. Vantage Wrath, Wyvern, etc., etc. Wyvern bases are good enough that, like, you don't need good stats.
Yeah. I've never used Anna in 3 houses because I've only ever done 1 run of each mode, and in every main house, I limited myself to only using that house, plus, like, 1 or 2 recruits, which I just, like, my first run I got in some units, and then every other run I used, like, 1 or 2 that can join as well, and then Silver Snow, I just used my favorites. I just did all Gremory run, which was surprisingly effective, but that's also because New Game Plus.
It's completely valid. I'm gonna put her next to Ashe just because I feel very similarly about them.
I have no idea, so I trust anyone else's judgment that's not mine on this.
So, you said you had some opinions about this character, so would you like to start?
So, when we talked before stream, you said that Wolf was just a stand-in for the Wolf Guard in FE1?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
And so, I have a caveat to that, where I think the Wolf Guard in FE1 is genuinely bad. I think they're like fun meme tier level, where they're still usable, but only because of the way stuff like the experience system and the stat caps of 20 work in FE1. They're someone put it well in that the Wolf Guard is there to show you how good Harden is in comparison.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're not including Harden in the Wolf Guard, because I was like, well, Harden is good.
But Wolf himself, so the way that Horseman works in FE1 specifically is interesting, because Hunter doesn't promote, and Horseman doesn't promote, and because of the experience system, there's no need to count them as a promoted class. So they're just a mounted archer. And Wolf has, in FE1, because FE1 just does this, Wolf has like double the growths of Sedgar. just for whatever reason. Sedgar has nothing that Wolf doesn't just have more of. And while Wolf doesn't start immediately able to just like use the arm scroll and use Parthia like a promoted Tomas can, he still has pretty solid growth. He's kind of like Castor on a horse, in that he has decent enough growths and usable bases. So if you need an archer, Wolf is probably a fine enough archer for your team. He doesn't get the promotion bonuses to sniper that like Tomas does, but he's still fine. He still has the extra movement. I think that Wolf himself is a solid enough unit. Like I said, kind of Castor tier. He's not going to be the best unit in your army, but archers don't need to be the best unit. They just need to shoot down wyverns, and he can do that.
So
the rest of the Wolf Guards suck. Yeah, outclassed but still fine for Wolf specifically. The rest of the Wolf Guards suck, but he is not actually bad.
Marisa?
I say not actually bad. Outclassed but still fine is probably where he belongs.
What do you think about Marisa?
So, Marisa, I feel like my brain lost the ability to make words. I apologize.
I'll make words. I used to think Marisa was worse than Amelia because she joins later and gets less levels, and is still like a bad unit training project. But then, friend of the channel, Casual Jacob, pointed out to me that Amelia has 0 enemies she can fight without donneling an archer. Marisa has 1 enemy she can fight, and that is axe units, because she has high avoid, and axe units have, axe fighters specifically, have bad hit. Just have her fight axe fighters and axe wights, and she can actually succeed at that. Whereas Amelia, you literally need to Donnel an archer. You know, people say, oh, well, on Amelia's map, you can trap the archer with a healer and have them heal. And, like, that is something you can do. But I think of that as very similar to, like, well, Gordon is the best unit because you can train him to 2020 by boss abusing.
And like Gazak,
you can do it, but I don't think that should be taken into account when tiering a unit. And the fact that training Marisa is less painful, or at the very least, like, less require you to go out of your way. You can just sort of do it while you're clearing a map, you know? In Ephraim Route, the chapter after she joins has a lot of axe fighters and forests. She can fight on those. On Erica Route, you're probably not recruiting her because it's annoying to do.
Walk all the way away from the throne just to walk all the way back to the throne.
Well, she gets recruited by Garrick, so you don't have to go
so you only
back.
have to walk halfway to Garrick, and then Garrick has to do the whole lure out and,
but also not kill her. Yeah.
You just unequip your weapon, kind of like you do with Joshua and Seth.
But I think she's greatly outclassed. Maybe fun meme tier. She's better than Amelia, but she might be in the same tier.
She's better than
her.
Amelia, but I think she's the same tier. The way that I want to put it is that Marisa has a Shamshir, and Joshua has a Killing Edge. The Shamshir is a worse Killing Edge that just happens to have a little bit more crit. Marisa is a worse Joshua that just happens to have a little more overkill skill and speed. So there are fun Marisa assassin memes you can do. She has that going for her, at least.
I will say, and this is not being accounted for in the tier list because it's a very specific context, but in a draft context, Marisa's value goes up severely because in a Sacred Stones draft, your thief options are Colm, Renak, Joshua Assassin, Marisa Assassin. She's one of 4 possible thieves, and she's one who's not going to get early picked for thief utility. Like, Colm and Renak probably get picked pretty early by people who want thieves.
Yeah.
But if you're drafting with people who aren't super experienced with drafting Sacred Stones, Marisa and Joshua slip under the bell as, like, not thieves, but they can be. They can't steal. Yeah. They can't steal like rogues can, but they can lockpick. And yes, you can buy keys, but you can't buy keys until after... Well, I mean, I guess you buy keys before Marisa.
You can buy door keys, but I don't remember if you can buy chest keys.
It's one or the other. You can buy one, but not the other. I don't remember which is which. But either way, she can be a thief, and, like, it might save you some money, or, like, having to shovel chest keys around or whatever, just to have a dedicated thief. So that's something that I'm not giving her credit for, because that would be a very specific thing. But if I were doing a drafting tier list, I would give her some credit for that.
Yeah, and that's generalized purpose draft, not like draft LTC or draft race, because like most people context draft. We need more casual drafts in Fire Emblem, as an aside. Can we just say that? Casual drafts are really fun.
But you know
Let's
who's not
limit
fun?
drafts to only LTCs.
You know what's not fun? Using Amid. I think he goes in the worst of the worst, and it's partially because of who he's replacing.
He replace?
Arthur. He's replacing Arthur.
So you take the mage who, if you inherit right, can become, a godlike unit, with a mage with no inheritance who is only ever going to be a mediocre mage.
And he doesn't even get a horse upon promotion.
Oh, he doesn't?
He
just
doesn't get a
mage
horse.
fighter?
He's a wind mage, too, so he only uses wind magic. He can't use any other element until promotion. I think he gets
not
smothers.
a mage, he's a wind mage to mage fighter. Oh
yes,
my goodness.
He's
that is
so awful.
Sad.
He's so awful. I think that he looks a little worse because of who he's replacing. I'm not sure if that counts against him or not, but either way, I think he's still awful.
Arthur's kind of mid unless you're doing Forseti Arthur build, in which case Arthur is fantastic.
True.
But even a mid Arthur is probably better than a mid.
Amid never gets a horse, and Arthur, even a bad Arthur, gets a horse. And I think that makes Amid very bad. Hey, this is Danny here, and I just wanted to address something before the next section plays. We end up talking about Kysha a little bit, and I was not aware that Kysha's pronouns are they, them. In the original English translation of Radiant Dawn, Kysha is referred to with he, him pronouns, but this is incorrect. Kysha is non-binary and uses they, them pronouns. I know it's a fictional character, so it doesn't super matter much, but I did want to go ahead and apologize for misgendering Kysha. I was not aware and will do better in the future. Also very bad, Liar. Liar might be the worst unit in Radiant Dawn.
It's either Liar or Kysha.
Liar has worse stats than Kysha. just all around.
Yes, she does.
So
and
I think
Kaiza at least has like Quick Claw.
also okay. This
innately
is
or something.
probably the result of a glitch, but I have no other time to talk about this. Kaiza's gauge on his join chapter starts at 17. In all other chapters, it starts at 0, like all other Laguz. But Kaiza's gauge starts at 17 in his join chapter. I'm fairly certain that that's a glitch, and most people don't know about it because nobody looks at Kaiza in the deployment menu. But on his join
Isn't it
chapter...
because he starts... Isn't it because the previous chapter is a Dawn Brigade chapter, and he's, like, technically on map for some amount of it?
Leth is on map on that chapter. Kaiza
Okay.
isn't. Leth is, and if Leth is dead, then some other unit replacing her, who's
Renulf
not
or
a unit.
something?
No,
Yeah.
not a playable unit.
Oh, a non-unit. Okay.
A unique boss is replacing her. But either way, it's not Kaiza. But yeah, Kaiza has a partially filled gauge. It might not be exactly 17, but it's more than 10.
Yeah.
And I always
Lyre
thought that was
has-
really weird, and it's definitely a coding error, and I don't know what causes it.
Interesting. Yeah, anyway, that's Kaiza. Lyre has the same problem that a lot of units in games that throw units at you have, in that you get her not in a map, and so she goes immediately to the bottom of the deployment order, and then it's off screen, and you forget that she exists.
She's also just, like, in the worst class in the game. Cat Gauge is terrible. Laguz in general is not where you want to be, but Cat Gauge in particular is the worst. And
she's a cat that you get, I think, only after you already have Lethe, and you get Renulf pretty soon after.
Renulf is
and
forced.
she's-
Renulf is forced
And
in
Renulf is
her join
forced.
map.
And Renulf and Lyre is the weakest of the Laguz. Like,
Yes.
the only I don't know if she has actually lower stats than Vika. She might in some ways.
But beasts
It's-
don't have Canto or Flight.
Yeah, beasts just get the worst of both worlds.
And she's facing stronger enemies too, which is
Very
a big
much
deal.
so. She's not facing level, rank 1 enemies. She's facing mid rank 2 enemies that the Grail mercenaries are just only now getting to the point where they can steamroll.
So we're going to put her here and casually move on to Jessie. Would you disagree with me that no one in Gaiden or SOV can be worse than some utility greatly outclassed, or outclassed but still fine TBH, just because of the way class bases work?
1, the way class bases work, and 2, the way deployments work.
Yeah.
I know that it fall to, train every unit in a game where everyone's deployed, like FE4 or Gaiden or whatever, but the fact that they are always deployed means that there's no opportunity cost to using them.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how much are you willing to put up with them, and Jesse is fine enough. He's not too far away from promotion, and if you get him to promotion, then he's perfectly fine. And when you get him, you can still feed him a couple enemies, like some of the monsters spawned by the Cantor. You can feed him a couple of those, and over time he'll get enough just map experience in order to promote, because Echoes gives everyone who got deployed free experience. I think he's fine. He's not. Yeah, he's definitely outclassed, but he's still fine. TBH.
This is FE11 Marth, not FE12 Marth. I think FE12 Marth is better than FE11 Marth. He's probably still, not great, but he doesn't deserve to be on a bad unit tier list. FE11 Marth
has a lot of random things that make him better just because of the way that game works. FE11 Marth, in the early game and into the mid game, has some utility, some usefulness because of his high luck and decent speed, but you gotta go out of your way to train him in order to make him survive anyone in Hard 5. And at that point, it's like, even if you max him out, he's still getting one-rounded by Medius automatically.
I think it's worth noting that the rapier, you can forge the rapier, much like forging the wing spear. It's much worse because you're at weapon triangle disadvantage against the majority of the enemies you would use the wing spear on. But if, you're doing an Iron Man and Sheeta died and you need a weapon to kill armors and calves, forging the rapier is not... It's not optimal, but it's not, the worst thing in the world. Like, I'd probably
Yeah.
rather forge a Horse Slayer and Hammer and Armor Slayer, like, that anyone can use. But if you need to, like, if funds are tight and you need an effective weapon and you can't afford both, like, the Rapier's there, it's just not good.
Yeah, I think I'd put Marth in greatly outclassed some utility because of the Rapier, because of his, high luck means that he's not getting crit. And because, if you train him, he can provide decently well for a decent amount of the game. It's just that, yeah, he's... It's one of those things where his endgame performance leaves so much to be desired that it's not even necessarily worth talking about. Specifically on hard 5. On easier difficulties, he can at least kill dragons with the falchion.
He's also a chest key, which also applies to our next unit,
Yes.
Cath. I think she probably belongs in either the same tier as him or outclassed but still fine TBH. It's a similar problem to Sothe in that, like, you have other thieves who just do the job better than her, but you can't use chest keys as freely in FE6. I think they're actually buyable, but...
Doesn't FE6 have 30 use lockpicks, and Cath gives you 3 of them because you have to steal from her, 3 times before she joins?
True, but I don't give her credit for... I don't give units credit for their
That's the same level
inventories.
of Sophia and Amelia.
Yeah, and especially because 2 of those are when she's a red unit, so that would be like saying, Percival, you get credit for the experience from killing his cavaliers. Or something like that.
Which is also similar, like, there's someone that says... I remember reading a post on Reddit or something where someone said that Cath actually actively harms you if you leave her alive, because she becomes a thief that steals treasure on other maps.
Oh, that's just not true, though.
Otherwise you don't, but that's not true, because other thieves spawn anyway. So.
Yeah, and even if, like, just play better. Just get the treasure faster. That's not something that she as a unit does. Like, does Minerva...
NPC does.
Is Minerva a bad unit because she shows up as a red unit in one map, even though she never fights you? Like, I'm not going to penalize blue Cath for the crimes of red Cath. I think that
I'd say
thief utility is more valuable in FE6 than FE9 as well. Like, you can steal a lot more valuable things. And
yeah, you don't need speed to steal in FE6 either, so her low stats don't really matter.
And throwing a chest key on a unit is a lot more of a cost when you have 5 inventory slots as opposed to 4 and 4. Like the way Path of Radiance does it, the chest key is not at the cost of a weapon. It's at the cost of your 4th vulnerary, which, like, you don't need to 4th vulnerary.
Yeah, basically. I still think that she deserves, like, greatly outclassed some utility, because other thieves generally are more durable, generally... Like, you don't necessarily need a thief to fight, but a thief that has durability and could fight in a pinch is probably better than a thief that comes with strictly inferior durability. And
True.
Yeah.
Riss, is he better or worse than a Vulnerary? Because it's FE1 Riss, so you can't reclass him.
FE1
It's
Riss,
just
so
a heal staff.
The fun thing about FE1 clerics is that they don't get experience from healing, they only get experience from surviving combat, and Riss can't even do that successfully. If he sees combat, he dies. I think he can survive a hit from, like, one of the pirates in Chapter 2, and if you don't level him up, then he, like, never survives a hit again. It's really sad. And his weapon level is so low that he can only use heal.
Yeah, I think it's how much do you value having a heal staff in Chapter 2? Because Lena becomes your heal staff once you have Chapter 3. Unless you want 2 clerics, which you might, but you probably don't.
Yeah, I think in general, Chapter 2... Yeah, you'll use the heal staff, like, twice, but generally those chapters are more designed around fort healing, and... There's a reason why FE3, the meme is that he gets replaced by a Vulnerary, and that's an upgrade, is because the Vulnerary you can just have on the unit. You have to be able to get him to the unit and hope that he survives.
I disagree that it's an upgrade, though, because the heal staff is 20 uses, the Vulnerary is 3 uses. Like, yeah, you talked about fort healing, but I think, like, bunching up your units and waiting for fort healing feels akin to like wasting a bunch of time stabbing, like Donneling an archer.
Yeah.
It's
Shadow
not
Dragon
the same.
strats are what you do that.
It still feels like, you know, yeah, you can not use Riss in FE1 because you can just wait around for 10 turns on a fort, but you could also just use Riss instead of backtracking to a fort.
Yeah, and because heal staffs don't give experience, you're not like penalized for using the heal staff on Riss as opposed to Lena. Debating then, greatly outclass some utility or just a fun meme?
I'm gonna go greatly outclassed because I don't think there's anything to meme around with like a healer who you like. It's not like you can send him into like Swordmaster like you could in Shadow Dragon for fun.
Yeah, there's no reclassing. It's like I have yet to see anyone manage to get Riss to Bishop in FE1, but if someone does manage to do that, send me a clip. I'd love to see it.
Virion, he's like the only unit in Awakening with bad growths, other than maybe some of the late game units.
And he also has bad bases too. Like he gets one round. Granted, everyone gets one rounded in Chapter 4 by all the Risen, but trying to protect him is so much of a pain in that chapter.
That said, he can do the Volt thing, where like everyone needs to gang up to kill, and he can attack from a range without facing a counter pretty accurately.
Yeah, and
if
Awakening...
you did train him, he can go Wyvern too. Like he has access to Wyvern, which I know, from talking about 3 houses, like yeah, everyone has access to Wyvern. A lot of units have access to Wyvern in Awakening, but not everyone, and like that is theoretically a point in his favor. He'll be the worst Wyvern ever, but like he can be a Wyvern. I don't know. I still think the most use you're going to get out of him is early game Archer stuff, though.
Yeah, and I think, like, because even as a stat backpack, Archer class gives so bad of stats when
it's
used
like skill,
as a parrot bot.
right?
Yeah, it's skill and maybe a little speed and some luck, I want to say. I don't actually know all the stuff. Like, and then you support up, and then he gives a little bit of everything, but not as much as, like, most other actual units. So
Bonite gives plus move, so if you use a Master Seal, send him Bonite, then he's plus move. But like a lot of things could give plus move.
A lot of things give plus move. Virion has I tried to use Virion in my first run, and then I dropped him because he just I think
around here, because of the comparison I made to Volt, or do you think he deserves lower?
I'd almost say lower because I don't find enough use for archers, but granted, this is the early game of Awakening before your units have really come into their own, so I could see greatly outclass some utility. I don't think he's as good as the rest of the units in that tier, even Riss, though, so...
Yeah, I think comparing, even like looking at like Fiona, Mist, Setsuna, I think he's worse than them.
Comparing him to Donnel is actually interesting, because Donnel has an end game, but not an early game, and Virion has arguably an early game, but not an end game.
He's got into like his join chapter and the next chapter, and then you get less deployment slots than units, and he hits the bench. Actually, there is argument for deploying him over one of the Cavs in Chapter 4 in like Lunatic Plus in particular, because in Lunatic Plus, if you get like an enemy you want to kill but they have Vantage, he can avoid Vantage.
Here's a use for Virion in Chapter 3 or 4 or whatever his join chapter is. He eats a hit from one of the units that could combine with the Hammer Risen that could kill Frederick, and so he keeps Frederick from dying.
I think you're convincing me, maybe unintentionally, to send him into greatly outclassed some utility, because
you know what?
You're reminding me that like it's all hands on deck in Lunatic and Lunatic Plus, and like if a unit's available for an all hands on deck, I feel like they can't be any worse than greatly outclassed some utility.
That's fair.
You know, it's the same argument for Boars and Volt of like, and Fiona as well. Like for the Part 3 chapters, he's doing something, and like everyone needs to do something. This is Path of Radiance, Alencia. I don't like her. She's a mounted staffer. So, like, she's the only mounted staffer other than Mist, and I think that if you haven't trained Mist, that's probably some utility.
Yeah, she's only mounted staffer aside from Mist, only flying staffer.
Yeah.
Also, only game over condition outside of Ike, which doesn't matter in outside of Iron Man conditions, but yeah.
I want to put her in greatly outclassed some utility, but that would fuck up the formatting, so I'm going to move Setsuna up to meme tier in order to do that. Unless you would like to argue for someone else to move instead.
I mean, I think Riss is, because it's
Sold.
only the one chapter of Heal.
Sold.
And, no, Riss is a fun meme, because if you've read Not Enough Fire Emblem on the forums, just Riss getting hit in the head with an axe is a fun meme.
Okay, you've sold me.
Yeah, Amity is a great sword, but she just doesn't have the strength or the durability to make use of it.
Just wait until Radiant Dawn. Okay, La Rochelle. She's an Est, but a staff unit in a game where the staff formula, doesn't make Est staff units benefit at all. I think, was it Engage the first game where the staff formula increases based on the level of the unit you're healing?
Might be.
I know in GBA it's just fixed healing.
GBA is fixed and then reduced, a reduced rate after promotion. Tellius is fixed and doesn't reduce after promotion. Awakening and Fates reduce if you outlevel your target. And then Engage does have some flex the other way where it increases if you're lower level than their target. Actually, does it increase? No, I think it just loses its penalty. Either way, La Rochelle starts at level... What level does she join at? Is level 6 or level 3?
She's very low level. I don't remember the specifics, but the bigger thing is she doesn't have C rank staves for restore.
Yeah.
I don't know. She's a mounted staffer. She's still fine, TBH. Mm-hmm. I want to put her in... This is another one I want in greatly outclassed with some utility, but that would F up my formatting again.
Yeah,
I might just have to bite the bullet and accept that.
I kind of want to put her into fun meme, but I think that is doing her a little bit of a disservice. Because, I mean, how I use La Rochelle in one of my runs that I thought was really funny was I made her a Valkyrie and then blitz trained her lights so she could use Evaldi, so I wouldn't have to give Evaldi to a bishop.
Oh, that is funny.
Yeah,
I do think
not
that
optimal,
the mounted
doesn't matter though.
As funny as that is for a meme, I think the non-combat utility does put her above just a meme tier.
Yeah, mounted healer, even though it is FE8 and she has 6/7 move instead of 7/8, still is useful.
All right, we're fucking up my formatting. So here's Mercy. What do you think about Mercy, Mercedes?
So she actually has a pretty good healing spell list, white magic spell list, because she gets Fortify, Physic, and Fortify. So this is almost certainly suboptimal, but I always made her my dancer. And so I would have a healing dancer, and so I'd just dance, and if I really needed to Fortify, I could just do that. She doesn't really have too much else she can do. Her offensive spell list is... It's the Ice list, which is not good in Three Houses. And I don't think she has any notable combat arts outside of Frozen Lance, which is just a meme in and of itself. What are your thoughts?
So I'm going to borrow a phrasing from fellow YouTuber Jonoaba. She's a dedicated healer in a game where healing spells are not necessary or even good. She is definitely the best dedicated healer, like you said, Fortify. While I would argue Fortify is bad because it hurts your low health builds, if you just want someone who can do a group heal, Fortify is the way you do that, I think it's bad to do because it has such a large range, it's hard to get all of your low health build units out of that range.
The fact that Three Houses has such reliance on low health builds is just another thing that makes me dislike Three Houses, but that's just because that's just who I am as a person.
But she has physic access, but so do the other healers, and they offer things other than just healing spells.
Linhardt
gets warp, and Marianne has that relic, and she can do some I think Marianne's the one who gets Frozen Lance, and she can do some fun stuff with that. Like
Yeah,
her
yes,
skill
Marianne gets
bane
Frozen
or skill
Lance,
boons are good.
and Mercy gets one of the bow debuff.
It's not
skills,
a good one. I don't remember what it is, but it's not a good
it like
one.
reduces their resistance or their magic for one turn.
But either way, like it's the debuff combat arts I think are bad because you'd probably rather have your combat arts kill people, especially later on.
Yeah, Three Houses is not a game that's really built for debuffs to matter. Outside
especially
of
minus res
monsters.
debuffs. Like, cool, you lowered their resistance, and now you have to have a second magical unit attack them. Like, it can't just be any other unit; it has to be another mage.
Yeah, the only ones that matter for debuffs mattering are monsters. And those, you're generally going to want some special stuff, or like just battalion gambits.
I want to put her here because she does get access to Physic, which makes her a decent healer. Especially like in-house, she'll be the better healer because she gets Physic access, whereas like Annette doesn't, but Annette, obviously a better unit.
And for the early game, she can get Physic pretty early.
Yes.
It's like C Faith, I want to say. Like C- or something. Pretty early on, and so she's pretty good as a healer with that utility before you get all of your crazy skill builds working. Mercedes is going to be a pretty good healer in the chapters where healing is important.
But for the majority of chapters, like, even if you need to heal someone, I feel like there are generally better ways to do it. You know, maybe your Warper uses Physic that they probably have on their spell list. Maybe, you know, Vulneries. There's combat arts that heal you. There's tons of different ways to heal.
Three Houses is a game that has just so many tools that once you get past, like, Chapter 6, you're not playing Fire Emblem, you're playing specifically Three Houses. And so Mercedes, again, is a decent enough Fire Emblem unit, but not a good Three Houses unit.
I'm arguing that she's the worst unit in Three Houses, simply because, like, they can do physical endgame stuff. She doesn't really have a place on an endgame team, even playing traditionally. Obviously there's the argument of like, well, you just warp skip all of the endgame, so it doesn't matter. But I do think that I personally like skipping the endgame of Three Houses, but I think that one, she doesn't contribute to a warp skip if you're doing that. But I also think that when evaluating units' endgame performance, you do need to also evaluate how they perform if you're not warp skipping. I like warp skipping, but I also think it's valid to not warp skip if you don't want to, and units other than Mercedes will contribute more to both of those playstyles.
I think that at the end of the day, that's why I made a good decision by making her my dancer, because it's just like, if you really need a heal in a pinch, she can do that. Otherwise, dancer is probably just better, as it gives her something to do. And
I have maintained that anyone who is listed as the best dancer, it's probably a bad sign for them as a unit, because it means you don't miss them outside of their dancering. Jahavier, speaking of a unit you don't miss because you get Johan instead,
is he the one without the horse?
He's the one without the horse. He gets bows on promotion, so, like, he has access to the bow arena. I think, theoretically, he's optimal in a ranked run because of access to the bow arena.
I was gonna say that his only claim to fame is better arena-ing because of slightly better stats and then bow access. But
his stats aren't even, like... So... Here's the thing, right?
1 point better in, like, strength, and that's it, or something?
In 0% growth, I chose Johan, because upon promotion, the promotion bonuses that Johan gets more than make up for Jahalvir's bases. And they're not that far from promotion, both of them. They're, like, 6 levels, I want to say, from promotion. They start at a pretty high level for the point in the game where you get them. And like, because of growths and stuff, like, he might end up better. Like, 0% growths isn't the best context to rate them in, but I do think it's worth noting that, like, their stats are close enough that the promotion bonuses makes Jahalvir better, or makes Johan better, and he has a horse.
Man, tell me Kaga hated axe fighters without telling me he hated axe fighters outside of Thracia and specifically Barst.
No, I think you basically hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, basically.
I guess he's a fun meme. Oh no, that fucks up the formatting too bad, so we can't see Jagan. So we're gonna put him in
Unless we want to swap
Let's put him in worst of the
someone
worst.
back up again.
I'll put him in worst of
Yeah.
the worst.
Yeah,
I think
ranked run utility doesn't necessarily apply because we're going after overall utility, not just specifically niche stuff. Otherwise, yeah.
And for everyone who's stuck around for, God, how long has it been? Almost 2.5 hours. Hopefully I cut
Yeah,
some of
about
this out.
2.5 hours. We'll see.
For everyone who's stuck around long enough to see it, I reward you with, despite the fact that I have a channel in my Discord named Lapis Haters Lounge, despite the fact that I constantly talk about how Lapis is a poopy bad unit and I hate her, and I don't understand the waifu favoritism where people say like she's one of 3 units worth training in maddening mode from the early game. I'm putting Lapis in not actually bad. I don't like her. I think that the majority of units you get at the same time as her, you would much rather invest the resources, whether that be experience or seals, into than her. Simply because I think that in Engage, it's a lot better to have good strength and bad speed than good speed and bad strength, and Lapis has good speed but bad strength. But
doesn't that make her outclassed but still fine, TBH? Or what's the but?
Well, maybe she is outclassed but still fine, TBH. I think you're right. I think you're right. She's outclassed but fine, TBH. I think that if you want to use Lapis, she's not like, I mean, she's not Bunei. She's not Bunei in terms of like just like no redeeming qualities. She's not Linden as in just like joins super late and people are stronger than her. And she's not John or Anna as in she's a villager you kind of have to invest resources in order to get her to work. You can just promote, I mean, promotion and second sealing is a resource, right? But you don't have to go through the
Especially
Micaiah
early
training
on
arc.
when she gets... But yeah, she is level 10. She has 800 SP, or is it 5? Yeah, 800 SP, I think. Or is it 500?
I think that the reason that I prefer the good strength but bad speed units, so like your Ambers, your Etiers, your Penettes, obviously like one of the best units in the game.
The game has so many ways to fix speed.
That, and so if you fix Amber or Etier or Penette's speed, either by putting them in a role that doesn't require it, like a crit build, or putting them into a class that fixes their terrible speed. Speed is a stat of thresholds. Eventually, once you get to the point where you are doubling things, and you can get them to the point where they're doubling things, like Wolf Knight fixes Amber's speed pretty quickly, even without Lin, to the point where he will double most non-Swordmaster enemies. Once you get to that point, it's just a matter of who has more strength. Whereas, like, if you fix Lapis's strength by either giving her a plus strength emblem or a plus strength bond ring, giving her energy drops, she's still doubling. If both units are doubling, who has higher strength is better. You can only fix her strength so much to the point where the good strength units, if you're using them and fixing their speed, it's not like their strength goes down as a result of that. If Panette is doubling and Lapis is doubling, Panette's dealing more damage.
Yeah, there's a weird conversation comparing Lapis to Diamant. Like, people say that Lapis is a better Diamant or Diamant is just Lapis. So it's like, Diamant is basically Lapis, but what if Lapis took a little bit of her overkill speed and put it into strength and defense? And Diamant is kind of the poster child of well-rounded unit who manages to get there despite all odds. Because he shouldn't, by math, be getting to where he is, and then he just kind of is somehow fine enough. Lapis needs the help to get that strength, and on one hand, Engage gives you a lot of tools to get that strength. Wyvern Knight gives plus 20 strength growth. Warrior gives either 20 or 25. Heck, you could even put her into like General and make, give her, like Sword General Lapis and have some extra strength and defense growth on her. But it's one of those things, if she does require that extra investment of strength fixing to really make her worthwhile. And oftentimes, for most people, even people who want to use her, you have to ask yourself some really tough questions in the soul mark.
Yeah, that soul mark really hurts The Brodians and the... It hurts the Brodians and it hurts the Solm Royals, but not their retainers. Well, I guess Bune. Bune doesn't count. Bune's garbage.
Bune gets hurt by everything.
But it hurts the Brodians because on their own, in a vacuum, the Brodians are units who are generally pretty worth training. Especially, like some more than others, but you can't train all of them. And even if you train like 2 or 3 of them, then the soul mark shows up and you're like, okay, how much room do I have for the ones that I trained? Because let's say, you were training Citrine and Lapis, right? And you suddenly don't have room for both of them. They're probably trained to the point where they will contribute fine in the soul mark, but if they sit out for a couple of chapters, suddenly they're going to need to get trained for a second time. And so you ask yourself, would I rather have a Dire Thunder nuke or a Fast Wyvern? Would I rather have... you have to decide between your darlings.
Mildly hot take, then, in that... Maybe not a hot take, but a way of phrasing that I've come to a decent amount of time is that a lot of the Brodians suffer from Dawn Brigade syndrome, in the sense that they're not actually bad, they're just fighting over a lot of limited resources, and who you decide to give those resources to will determine who actually ends up getting used.
See, I think the Dawn Brigade are actually bad, but I think that's a conversation for a different time, because we've rambled on for long enough.
Yeah, definitely. We can talk about that maybe in a part 2 if people want to have another 3-hour rant fest.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. Once again, check out Mythril Zenith's channel. It's down in the description. Yeah, bye-bye. Zenith doesn't know I'm doing this, but... Boop. The spirit of compromise was a lie.